Okay, so that should start recording now. So yes, welcome. Thank you for joining. So today's session, we've got up to an hour. So we've got till 4:30 today. It may finish earlier, but we'll see how we go with time. So as I say, I'm going to share my screen and go through a presentation. I am going to unshare at some point and then reshare the Vulnerable Learners Protocol so we can go through the protocols together. We have got different people from different settings on the call today. So we will be covering information for schools, for post-16 providers and for internal teams as well. So we're going to try and cover everything. If you have any questions, please shout. As I say, I'm going to be sharing my screen, so I'm not going to be able to see, and you guys have got your cameras turned off as well. So please shout whilst I'm presenting. If not, pop a question in the chat and we can pick that up after, or once we finish the presentation, we can cover the questions then. Okay, so if you just bear with me for one moment while I share. If I could just ask, once I've started sharing, if somebody could give me a yes, that if you could see my screen, that would be amazing. So hopefully this is sharing. Can somebody give me a yes if you can see this presentation?
Yes.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you very much. Okay, so the Vulnerable Learner Protocol. So today we're going to be covering the purpose. So what is the purpose of the Vulnerable Learners Protocol? Why was it created? What is in the protocol, so what is made up, what information is in those protocols, what they're made up of, how you should use it. So as I say, we have got different people from different settings. So when I'm talking through the protocols, I want you to have a think about how they would sit and how you would use those in your setting. Why it's important. So why is it important that we're using, or you're using, these protocols as a resource? Okay, so that's what we're going to cover today. So first of all, the purpose. So the Vulnerable Learners Protocol exists to improve transition into post-16 for vulnerable learners. That's the purpose, the overall outcome of the Vulnerable Learners Protocol. One of the purposes is to have all the information about transition in one document for professionals. So all that information and all those activities that make up transition from year 9 onwards into post-16, all that information is in one place. For all staff in the setting to understand their responsibilities and their role. So this is really important. Within settings, everybody has got different roles and responsibilities, and those activities and actions of transition sit with different people. So it's really important that within your setting and using the Vulnerable Learners Protocol, that you can understand your own role and responsibility. And then lastly, the purpose for all staff in the setting to understand the role and responsibility of others. I mean, they're all important, but this is important for the reason of understanding. You understand what you need to do, but where does everybody else fit into that? So as an FE provider, you know your role and responsibility, but what is somebody else's role and responsibility, and how do they fit within that? So that's the purpose of the Vulnerable Learners Protocol. It exists to improve the transition into post-16 for vulnerable learners. Then lastly, to understand all the steps and considerations that are needed. So why was it created? So there's a couple of reasons of why it was created, and this was created. We're going into the second academic year of using the Vulnerable Learners Protocol, but the discussion around the Vulnerable Learners Protocol and having something exist started back in 2019, 2020, just before the pandemic. And it was a recommendation from 2 serious case reviews. So following those case reviews, one of the things that came out of that was having information in one place and understanding the roles and responsibilities of others and who is taking responsibility for those different transition activities. So that came from the serious case review. and then feedback from consultation with partners. So that happened early 2020, when the feedback was, again, having a resource that can be used and easily accessed. And one of the things that we had from the feedback was that it was easy to use, that it was a practical document. So we hope that that's what we have achieved. And then lastly, the most recent reason, and actually the Vulnerable Learners Protocol was created before this, but I think it's important to highlight this. In the AP and SEND improvement plan, so the alternative provision and SEND improvement plan, there is information in there about supporting transition and the transition being better from school into post-16, so improving that transition. So we really wanted to highlight that is a focus on that improvement plan. Okay. So, sorry, here we go. So what information is in the protocols? So I'm actually going to just stop sharing my screen here, so then I can just switch to the actual protocol so you can see it, and hopefully it will make more sense seeing it in person. So I'm just going to unshare and then reshare the protocol. Okay. Hopefully you can all see that. If somebody can give me a yes to that, you can see that Year 11 protocol, that would be great.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. So first of all, I want to say we're looking at the Year 11 protocol here, but 3 protocol exists because we start the protocols from Year 9. So we have 3 protocols. The first one is a Year 9 and Year 10 protocol, which we're not going to look at today. We've got a Year 11 protocol, and then we've got a Year 12 protocol. So we're going to have a look at the Year 11 and the Year 12. The information, the bulk of the information is the same in the Year 9, Year 10 and the Year 11. So the information that I'll go through first, it is the same, and then I'll highlight the bits that are different. In the Year 12, there is a bit about non-attenders and non-engagers that is different because of that statutory responsibility. So just wanted to highlight that. So 3 protocols. So looking at the Year 11 one, we've got the introduction. So the Vulnerable Learners Protocol, why it exists. So this just outlines what I've just explained, why it was created and the purpose of the protocol. Then we go on to a paragraph about the alternative provision and the SEND improvement plan. So we've just put a short paragraph in there that's taken from the improvement plan, which here talks about successful transition must be well planned. So that's what we're trying to achieve from using and having the vulnerable learners protocols that start from Year 9. The next paragraph along is information sharing. So as some of you may know on the call, we set up a new process 2 years ago for schools to share information to post-16 providers. And this is something that we're still working with local schools and settings about sharing that information in at the earliest point possible. So again, we've just put this in here because information is such a key transition activity as part of that transition into post-16. So as we go through the document, we do talk about information sharing in a little bit more detail, but it was really important that we highlighted that. And also we have highlighted the paragraph from the improvement plan that talks about information sharing, and that many felt that support is not in place at the point of transition, as information about students' needs is not shared readily, easily or early enough. So we felt that it was really important to highlight that there. So again, these are in all 3 protocols. So then we move on to when using the protocol in your setting. So again, this is in all protocols, and this is best practice. I'm not going to go through all of this, and we will talk about how you use it in your setting shortly. But we've just highlighted there what we feel is the best approach to use in your setting. So there's things here like, there is a whole team service approach, and it is embedded into your processes. So then we move on to the definition of a vulnerable learner or a vulnerable child or young person. This came directly from consultation we did in summer 21. So it was that stakeholders said that it was really important. They wanted the information in there about who a vulnerable learner is. So we added that in. Then we've got a paragraph on here around travel assistance for young people with any HCP. This came directly from the serious case review. So it was really important to highlight travel for young people with an educational healthcare plan, as travel for young people with an EHCP is discretionary in post-16, and it can be a barrier for young people moving into post-16. I'm not going to read through the paragraph here, but as you can see, we put enough information in there so that when schools and settings are reading this, they can feel prepared and know what to do when it comes to that point. So all the information is there. Then we've got the paragraph around non-attenders and non-engagers. Again, I'm not going to go through it, read it line by line to you. But in here, it's just about the responsibility and following your internal policies, but working together to improve school attendance, talking about early intervention and to pick up on any barriers to attendance. Joint working, as we know, is really, really important. So consider that multi-agency response. Who else is working with the young person? As I say, this paragraph is slightly different for post-16 due to that statutory responsibility. And then non-engagers, this really talks about linking in with other services. So a vulnerable young person who is not neat. So are you linking in with the right services? Have you followed your policies and processes and referred to the right people? So that's just a reminder there for settings and services. So then going through the protocol, and this is the main body of the protocol, and this is the table. So in here, as you can see, on the left-hand side, we've got the terms. In the middle, we've got the actions. And on the right-hand side, we've got the professional. So if I scroll through this just quickly, you can see that we've got schools there, East Sussex County Council Children's Services team. And then as I scroll down further, we've got the FE provider as well. So the point of this table puts together all those actions and what happens throughout the academic year that supports the transition. And now this covers lots of different things, from things like actions like PEPs, annual reviews, careers, sharing information. So there's lots of different actions that include different people within your settings as well. So it's not one person's responsibility. This will be the responsibility of multiple people. Now, what we're going to do is, as you can see here, I've highlighted some. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but I think it's just really important to highlight some of these actions and some of the ones that are relevant to you. What I want to say is, before we start on that, is some of these actions are mandatory. So as we go through here, you will see some that are around holding PEPs or holding annual reviews, which, as we know, are mandatory actions. Not all actions are mandatory, they're best practice. So we're not saying you have to do these, but what we're saying is, by putting this all together in a protocol, is that you can really see that big picture of transition and how all those different types of actions fit together. So if you can think about it as a bridge, and all these different actions are needed to support that vulnerable learner. once one thing starts getting taken away, that bridge is going to get weaker. So this is about having all that information, best practice and mandatory responsibilities in one place so that we can all understand what that bigger picture of transition is. Also, I just want to highlight at this point is the Vulnerable Learners Protocol isn't mandatory. This is here to use for you to use as a resource. And we think it's a really, really important and useful and practical document that you can use, and you can really think about how you can use it in your setting. And we're going to have a moment to think about that in a little bit. Okay, so highlighting a couple here. So first of all, this one that I've highlighted is consider which young people will need to be referred to the FE provider via the information sharing for vulnerable learners. And this is for the school. So this is thinking about which young people in your setting is a vulnerable learner and and what FE providers are going to need to know about this young person. So the reason we've put this in term 1 to term 6 is this will be something that happens throughout the whole academic year. So that's when that will start. So the next one that I've highlighted is here. Ensure all students continue to have access to a full careers programme meeting the Gatsby benchmark. That one's a little bit more vague, but that's as a reminder for schools and for other settings looking at this, that all students need to continue a full careers programme. And as you can see here, this would probably sit with the careers leader. So if you're a SENCO in a school, it's really important to understand and know what that careers programme is, because that will feed into the annual review at some point. So it's really important to understand what else is happening around the setting. Then another one here for schools for term 1 is each student should have a Careers East Sussex account to submit their post-16 applications. So this is for the school. However, if you're a further education provider looking at this, you know that when that should happen in term 1, the schools should be setting up the Careers East Sussex accounts to submit the post-16 applications. So that happens in term 1. Some schools do it maybe slightly later, and that's actually something to highlight here. Is though it says term 1 there, it might happen in term 1 in term 2 in your school. So if that does happen later, you can change this. It doesn't mean that you have to move it to doing it in term 1. You can adapt this table so it suits your setting. So then just scrolling down to the next one. If the young person is not attending school, teams of professionals supporting the young person must agree who can support them to explore their career options, complete applications for further education post-16 and attend interviews. So this is for East Sussex County Council Children's Services teams. So this is really important to know who is responsible for this. So if you're a professional working with this young person in year 11, it is really important to have that conversation with the school to find out who is supporting with that. Is that you? Is that somebody in the school setting? And is it somebody else? And also it might be a reminder that you need to link in with the further education provider to talk about this, completing the applications and or attending interviews with them as well. Scrolling down, so still in term 1, we've got term 1 for the further education provider, inform all schools and professionals of the transition offer. So again, as I've just said, this might not happen in term 1. This might actually happen in perhaps throughout year 10 and maybe later in the academic year. But this is a reminder for further education providers to share all that information. And as I say, it's for the other settings, professional schools, to know that that information can and will be shared via the further education provider. And then we've got here term 2 onwards from the further education provider interviews. So, I mean, you know, as further education providers, that those interviews will be happening. So, as I said at the beginning, this isn't reinventing the wheel. These are things that you're already doing, but it's about putting it all down there in the protocol so everybody can understand that whole picture. So, term 3. This is East Sussex County Council Children's Services. So if you're a social worker, so if you are working with a vulnerable learner, a vulnerable young person, and they are attending a school, you must liaise with the school to ensure the young person is referred by the school to the Youth Employability Service for their risk of Year 11 transition support. So that is one to be aware of. If a young person isn't attending, have the school referred them, or do you need to do a referral to the Youth Employability Service? Scrolling down. So term 4, further education providers to start their high needs funding applications for the next academic year. So again, this is something that you know, but when you're using this in your setting, it's just really important for other, or it may be really important for other people to be aware of when these things are happening. As I say, we will go on to how best practice within your setting, but it is so important that you have a whole school setting approach to the vulnerable learners protocol. Even if it doesn't include you and you haven't got a direct responsibility for it, it's really important for people to know what is happening within the setting, and perhaps where they do fit into it, if they do, or if not, to be aware of it. Okay, so then moving into term 5, we've put here, this is for schools, so complete the information sharing for vulnerable learners, process and send the completed spreadsheets to the relevant further education provider. So that's completed and sent. Scrolling down into term 5 and term 6 here. So this first one is for the further education provider. Offer a meeting for the schools following receiving the spreadsheet for information sharing for vulnerable learners. Now, we haven't gone in full detail in this one, but that would be your safeguarding lead that would hold that meeting. So that's just, again, a reminder. And this one I think is quite important, because if you're in supported learning, but this sits with the safeguarding team, you know that that is happening with the safeguarding team. You know it's them that's responsible for that. Then term 5 and 6, sticking here with school safeguarding and further education provider. The relevant person at the school to meet with the relevant person at the FE provider to discuss support needs. This should be done by the designated safeguarding lead, but may include SENCOs or other relevant staff. That's why that's the school safeguarding and the FE provider. So that meeting should be held in term 5 or term 6. And then moving on to term 6, East Sussex County Council Children's Services. If you've been working with a young person and support is coming to an end, you must ensure all relevant information has been shared and referrals completed to appropriate professionals. This may include the Youth Employability Service, further education provider, or other professionals. So again, it's really important that that information and that conversation is happening between the professional, so the professional East Sussex County Council Children's Services team is having those conversations and liaising with the relevant organisation setting, so that information is shared and that they know that you're a link as well. And if you're continuing to work with the young person, it is also to have those conversations. Okay, so they're the ones that I've highlighted on this protocol. As I say, I didn't want to go through all of them, read them all aloud to you, but I just wanted to highlight a couple there. So please go away to your settings and have a look through all of those. I'm going to stop sharing and just share. We're going to have a look at the year 12 as well, as I'm aware that we've got quite a lot of colleges, further education providers on the call. So I'm just going to reshare. Fab. So I will scroll down to the table. Now, as you can imagine, the table isn't as big. There isn't as many actions in year 12. And when you look at the year 9 and year 10 vulnerable learners protocol, you'll see the same. The year 11 actions on the table, that the year 11 has the most on there. And as you can imagine, on the year 12, most of the actions sit with the further education provider rather than the school. So just to highlight a couple here, I've highlighted the school safeguarding from term 1 onwards. So this one is to find out where your students have enrolled. So this one's really important. You need to speak to your careers leader in the first instance, who will have access to the Aspire database and can see where the young person's enrolled. Now, there is a delay on this, so it is really important to get that information as soon as possible. But this is the protocol, this is the steps that should be taken to find that information out. So then scrolling down to the next one, which is the further education provider, is share enrolment list with East Sussex County Council Aspire data team. So you can see where those two link in. So this is really important that that information is shared at the earliest point. Then we've got scrolling down term 1 to term 6, sticking with the FE provider. If the young person is moving on to a different FE provider from your provision, you must share relevant information to the new provider. So that's the same as when we're talking about sharing information from school to post-16 provider. If a young person that started with you is moving on, so that could be a year 13 as well. So I know this says year 12, but maybe thinking about some of those year 13s, year 12 or year 13 of young people moving on. So just scrolling down to the next one there that I've highlighted, again for the FE provider, term 1 to term 6. If the young person's attendance is low or there are concerns, contact the professional that is working with the young person. Again, this is information that I'm not here to teach you to suck eggs. This is just about explaining this resource and having all that information in one place. But one important thing about the actions, and perhaps this one, is who's responsible for calling that person. So if that attendance is low, will the tutor be calling? Would wellbeing or safeguarding be calling? So it's really important that this information is disseminated and known to all of those people that would be involved with that and who would be doing it. So again, term 1 onwards, so this is for East Sussex County Council Services teams. If you are working with a young person who is NEET, so this is a social worker, early help. If you're working with a young person who is NEET, so not in education, employment or training, or at risk of NEET, ensure you complete a referral to the Youth Employability Service. Carrying on, term 1 still, sticking with East Sussex County Council Children's Services. Following enrolment updates from the further education provider, East Sussex County Council Aspire data team to share information, year 11 unknowns with the Youth Employability Service. So this is a specific team. This is the Aspire data team that will share the information about unknown leavers with the Youth Employability Service. We've got some actions there for the Youth Employability Service, but I won't highlight those today. But hopefully you can see where you would sit within that year 12 picture. Okay, so there's some highlighted from the year 12 protocol. So I'm just going to go back now to the presentation. Okay, so what I just want you to have a think about is how the protocol should be used in your settings. So as I've mentioned, it's a whole setting service approach. So when we say whole setting service approach, how would that work within your setting? So if you're a children's services team. So thinking about your whole team, is that something that's shared to all practitioners? Is that saved on a shared drive somewhere? How is that information shared amongst your team? Also thinking about new starters as well, is that part of the induction process? Will they be given that information again to understand the transition? So think about how you can use that in your whole setting service approach. Understand who or what role is responsible for completing the actions. So as I said to you, that's a table and that's saved on our share drives and I can send it to you. It's a Word document, so you can change that table. So what some settings have done is, as I say, they've changed the term. So it might be that they do something in term 2 rather than in term 1. So they've adapted the terms, but they've also, on the right hand side where it says school or FE provider, they've written the name of the role or the person that is responsible for that action. So again, that can really help you again see who is involved in that transition. So if we took a school setting, for instance, and there was a PEP, you could perhaps write down the LAC lead on there. So you could either write down the role or the name of the person, and then if there's something about careers, you could write down the careers leader, and that's the same in FE settings as well. So think about how you can adapt or use the table that suits your setting. Know how young people not at school access the actions. So this is more for those year 11s, the school setting. How are they going to access that? So thinking about some of those careers actions, how are they going to be supported to complete their application or their interview? So thinking about how those young people not accessing settings, how will those actions be completed for them? Who is going to be responsible for that if it's not somebody within the setting itself? And then working together, it's really important. As you can see on there, it takes a lot of different people to support the transition for these vulnerable learners. And it is so important that we work together and we communicate. So it's just highlighting working together internally as well as externally. Okay, and then lastly, why is it important? So it's to improve the transition for vulnerable learners into post-16. That's why it's important. Having all this information and resource will help us support and improve that transition for vulnerable learners into post-16. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to stop recording as well, so it can give you the chance to ask any questions without being recorded. So I will just stop the recording.